No, I'm about a third of the way through the Royal Green myself. I'm trying to.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I'm trying to get this to a point where there's no spoilers for me or the audience, but I definitely want questions to be answered.
That's pretty good. About a third in, you can't give away too much at that point, right?
Yeah. It's very early on. I kind of got a grasp on maybe like you as the author's politics, where the queen is giving a speech and she's talking about the old enemy of old that the king had ousted, and her description of how he destroyed the kingdom and started the blight and the famine. I'm like, oh, he's a communist.
Yeah, no, exactly, right. So
like that seemed pretty on the nose to me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and the story has political intrigue, right? It's dealing with politics for sure. I mean, you have the tension between these groups. So you've got the queen, the authoritarian queen in charge, and you've got the duke who's sort of rebellious and they're worried about revolution kind of thing. And then of course their history, which involves a sort of socialist or communist, whatever, past. And so it definitely, the setting and the context has this political tone in many regards, and you're kind of seeing this exploration of those things. And I would say at the start, I was very like right wing, but more authoritarian. So, and by writing this, a lot of it was kind of putting some of my own views on trial. So it was casting some of my views, the sort of neoconservative, pro-war, round up the rebels and people who question, like putting all that stuff, kind of casting them as the villain and really asking myself, like, is this really what I want to believe? And by showing it. And so then you see characters like the Duke Dareth, who wants a more kind of freedom-oriented approach to things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my beat going, okay, here I've been hearing people talk about this stuff. And you see this in like the Republican Party back when I was Republican, with like the Tea Party movement, and suddenly this talk of limited government being emphasized again. And so there's different tensions and questions were going on in my own life, and then I think it certainly spills into the story that way. And yeah, by the end, it's clear that I've rejected the authoritarian roots and upbringings I came from, and I'm like headed straight for liberty. So
yeah, it's definitely where I'm at. Like, I've gotten vibes of what I would liken it to, and what I would say, like, it struck to me as kind of resembling historically is like what would have happened if the czars took power back after the socialist revolution in Russia.
Yes, that's a great analogy. That is kind of right. It's got these parallels. So it's like, imagine, right, exactly. If instead of after communism, right, instead of this, like there was this great opportunity to have changed things, and instead they reverted back to the system they had before. Well, communism didn't work, so we're going back to kings and queens, right? And you have the Duke Dareth, who maybe missed his shot to be like, what if we try something different, right? Maybe there was still a reason that the communists took over originally, right? Maybe like there was something wrong. And so,
but he's still like, the book is still very like, it hammers to him like the fatal flaw of like the deceit of like self-aggrandization, when his daughter's like, well, she's just going to think of you as that enemy too. He's like, I can do better. It's the I can do better mentality.
Yes.
Not there's a better system. It's I'm better that he has.
Yeah, no.
And I feel like that is very representative of the conservative right that we have today still. That's
a great way to put it. And there's all these nuances and layers to it. And I feel like that is kind of where my starting point was, because as a right-wing, neocon person, I'd always been told about how evil the left was in communism. So that was sort of the context of like, okay, we know that doesn't work. But then as we see with Republicans and right-wing people today, what they're proposing and doing, whether it's nationalistic or whatever, their version, it's just another form of authoritarianism. And so I think in the ruling class of this story, you see this question of, it is the thing where you've replaced the communist, disaster with really any better? Is it actually people? And then, like you said, even the rebellious Duke, there's this question of but how do we know his system's going to do any better either, right? How do we know that the thing he wants to impose is going to do it? So hence the father's concerns and so forth.
It's the age-old question that I was asked in Firefly and Serenity. It's like, or even Doctor Who asked it in their anti-war episode. It's like, how do you protect your revolution from the next one? It's like, once you've created your utopia, what do you do with the people like you?
Yeah, and I tell people too, this 3-book series, you can see my journey from rejection of neocon authoritarian roots, exploration of like minarchism, limited government, and I basically arrive at the end at ANCAP. By the end, it's pretty clear that I figured out how to break that cycle. And so that process of going down the rabbit hole of libertarianism, I think, is expressed very, very similarly in there.